Okay, Joan, well, let's start at the beginning. We are in the middle of a pretty remarkable space. Tell me the story of this museum. This isn't just any museum. This is a tribute museum run by family and survivors,
Correct,
right?
correct. And thank you so much for coming here and being a part of this experience in this museum. So the idea for this museum was really born right after September 11th. The families of victims who died here on September 11th, they were in the area all the time. And they saw the number of people who would come here, would really want to have their questions answered, to get information about what happened here. And there really wasn't a place. And so the idea of opening a center where people could come and visit, speak to people, ask questions, get information, that was born. And in 2006, through the 9/11 Families, Widows, and Victims Association, the project of the 9/11 Tribute Center was established. We opened in 2006. We were not originally in this space. We were called the 9/11 Tribute Center, and we were located on Liberty Street, right across the street from, at that point, Ground Zero. Over the years, we saw a lot of people. We've done tons of walking tours. We've done tons of gallery tours, and it came time for a bigger space. And so, I believe it was 4 years ago, we actually moved from Liberty Street into this space at 92 Greenwich Street. And so now you're within what we call our new space, but it's not new anymore, but it is our home, and it's a very special place, and we are very, very proud of it.
You say you answer a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. You are passing out lots of information to people from all over the world. Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Why do you want people to know what happened here?
Well, 9/11 is part of our history. It happened. People should know what happened here. It's important to understand what we saw, what we experienced, what we lived through during that time.
And what you lost.
And what we lost. And so it is very important to us that we tell the stories. And by the way, our stories come from many different constituency groups. So we have family members who lost loved ones at the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We have those family members who volunteer for us, who come here, who visit. The other constituency groups are survivors, people who actually made it out of the towers on that morning, rescue, recovery workers, firefighters, police officers, Port Authority police officers, EMT, and all the trades. They were all here. They witnessed, they saw. And civilian volunteers, we had FEMA, we had the American Red Cross. There were so many volunteers that were here to help after 9/11. And last but not least, my constituency group, which is area residents, people who lived here and who experienced what happened here on 9/11, many of whom left for various reasons. Many who came back and want to tell this story because they lived through not only September 11th, but the subsequent rebuild and creating a whole new community. And so, back to your question, it is so very important that all of those stories are told. I have a friend who also happens to be a docent here. Her name is Ann Van Hine. Ann is a family member. She lost her husband Bruce Mannheim, who was a firefighter. Anne just recently wrote a book. And if you have an opportunity, you should read the book. The book is called Pieces Falling. And it's really a story of surviving September 11th through faith, family, and the FDNY. In the book, Anne says she didn't realize this at first because she had her own story. But when she came to the Tribute Museum and she started hearing everyone else's story, she realized that those stories together create a mosaic. And they tell a bigger story of what happened here on September 11th through the eyes of people that were here and experienced it.
And that's what I want to ask you about. You mentioned this is your home. This is your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. These are your neighbors, your people. Mm-hmm. So walk me through what that day was like for you, because mm-hmm. they say it's the universal moment. You'll never forget it. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you?
So my story is really about what I saw on that day. I woke up very early on the morning of September 11th, and I must say I'm not a morning person. So me waking up at like 6 o'clock that morning was very unusual for me. But I was also getting ready to go on vacation, and so I decided, you know what, I'm up, let me shower, get dressed, and go off to work. Now, the year before, my employer had moved us to Jersey City, which is on the other side of the Hudson River. So I had a short commute, and my commute involved walking through the buildings on my side of the highway, taking a footbridge over to the World Trade Center, going down into the World Trade Center all the way to the lower level, and boarding a train, the PATH train, the Port Authority Trans-Hudson Line, which takes me over to Jersey City. And on that morning, I did just that. I got to my office. I actually made a stop in the lower level. A lot of people don't realize the World Trade Center had a mall. There was a mall in the lower level with tons of stores. And I had made a stop in the Duane Reade before I went down to the train because I had to buy a few things for vacation. And so by the time I got to my office in Jersey City, it was about 8:15 a.m. And I got my coffee, did my normal routine. I talked to a couple of people, and then I set up myself in a conference room because I was working on a project. I was with a colleague. We were going to get our work day started. That boardroom faced the city. And where we were located in Jersey City, we had a full view of Lower Manhattan. Nothing was in front of us, no obstruction, and so I could see those towers in my line of sight, clear as day. Beautiful view from Jersey City. What I didn't realize at that moment was that I was about to have a front row seat to the worst attack on U.S. soil. 8:46 a.m., I heard a loud sound, and I looked up into the window. It was natural, the window was right in front of me. And I saw a commercial jet. And I watched that plane. I never took my eyes off of that plane. I watched it as it headed towards the North Tower, One World Trade Center. I noticed that there was no attempt to go around the tower, divert the tower. In fact, what I was watching was what appeared to me to be a deliberate and direct hit on that tower. And I watched as American Airlines Flight 11 got swallowed up into the North Tower. What I remember most vividly at that moment was I saw that gaping hole at the top of the tower. There was this black smoke hemorrhaging from the tower. And what I remember so vividly were the screams from my colleagues who had just seen what I had seen. Now, I worked in a sales office. There were a lot of people in the office that morning. People were getting ready to go out to their appointments. It was a Tuesday morning. We had a lot of people there. And what we had seen terrorized all of us. The first thing I did was I picked up the phone in the conference room and I called my husband. He was still at home, right here, just a few blocks away from the museum. And when he picked up the phone, I was frantic. I said to him, "Did you see what just happened?" And he said to me, "No, what? What happened?" And my husband had just gotten out of the shower. He was getting ready to go to work. He walks to work because he works right here in Lower Manhattan. So he was in the shower when this all took place, the first plane. And I said to him, "Go to the window, look up." And when he went to the window, I explained to him what I saw, and I said to him, "I think we've been attacked." And I always tell my guests, I have no insider information. I'm not psychic. I simply had what I saw. I saw the plane headed right for the towers, no attempt to divert. I'd like to show you this photo, if I may, because this photo will show you exactly where I was on the morning of September 11th. This was my view. And I always tell my guests, if you were a pilot, you could not miss these towers. These towers were taller than anything else. They defined our Lower Manhattan skyline, and you could not miss them. And so, in my mind and in my gut, I was already thinking that this was an attack. I really didn't have to think much longer, because at 9:02 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, that by the way is in this photo, United Airlines Flight 175 flew right over my building in Jersey City. We actually heard it. It was so loud, the engines were roaring. That plane was, I've read that plane was going over 500 miles an hour. There's no way you couldn't hear those engines, and they were loud. That plane flew down towards the Statue of Liberty. It made a sharp turn over the statue, and then at 9:03, it struck the South Tower. And now the world knew. Now my greatest fears were realized. This was indeed an attack. I called my husband at that very moment for the second and last time. And I only had one objective. I wanted him out of here. I wanted him to get out to safety. When he picked up the phone, I didn't say a word. He was now frantic. He told me that from my apartment window, he saw the explosion on the South Tower. He said everything in the area shook. It was like an earthquake. And he said he saw things falling. And at that moment, I said to him, "Get out. Go south, go west, do whatever you have to do to get off the island." My husband's story is actually part of the boat lift story. People don't realize over 500,000 people were evacuated from the island of Manhattan on that morning by boat. They got on ferries, they got on private boats. And there is a film about it. It's called The Boat Lift. And the ferries and the private boaters were absolutely incredible on that morning. They did everything they could to get 500,000 people safely off of this island. I lost contact with my husband after I spoke to him. I lost contact with him for about 7 hours. Through the grace of my friendships, my colleague, Andy, had grabbed my arm. We were evacuating my office, and I didn't know what I was going to do because I couldn't get back here. And she said to me, "Joan, you're coming with me." And that was my first experience with the human spirit. People with heart who are willing to do anything that they could do to help others in their time of need. Because I couldn't get home. And we already knew that it was very unlikely that I was going to be getting home anytime soon. And I still didn't know where my husband was. 7 hours later, I did get a call from my husband. He actually made it over to Jersey City. He made it over, believe it or not, on a police tugboat. I like to show this story, this photo as well. A lot of people look at this photo and they think this is smoke. It's not. Some of it may be, but most of it is not. Most of this is toxins that came down and were released into the air when the two towers collapsed. And this cloud here that you're seeing in this photo is responsible for making thousands and thousands of people sick and still dying long after September 11th. And so this photo is particularly important to me, not only because it tells my husband's story, but it tells the story of the thousands and thousands of first responders who arrived at Ground Zero after the attacks to rescue, to recover, and to assist. They were exposed to unbelievable health hazards, and many of them are still dying today. If people think that 9/11 is over, the answer is 9/11 is not over. And I would hope that they would visit here and talk to us so that we can explain to them what happened on that day so they can understand all of this, because it is so important.
Let me ask you this. You said you came back, you wanted to come back. When I look at that and when I think of the images, it would be hard to come back.
Yep.
Not because you think you're not safe, no one is truly safe, but because of the memories, because of the trauma. How did you make yourself come back?
Well, so a couple of things about that. We did come back 6 days later to check on the damage of our apartment. And when we came back, I have to say, I kind of had a second September 11th, because when I opened up my apartment door, the first thing I noticed was all of my windows were blown in. Everything I owned was covered with about 1.5 inches of dust. Almost nothing was salvageable. And we realized that we weren't going to be able to live there for a long time. But to your question, why would somebody want to come back? This was my home. This was my safety. This was my sanctity. My husband and I loved our lives here. And we were never going to give in to the evil that happened here on that day. We knew that we had to come back. Frankly, it was never even a decision. We knew we were going to come back. It was much bigger than us. People often ask me, Joan, were you afraid to come back? Oh, you better believe I was afraid to come back. I was afraid because there was so many environmental and health concerns here after September 11th. We knew that that was a risk. Honestly, the area had a stigma. A lot of people were saying to me, Joan, please don't go back there. Please don't go back. There are security risks. We're concerned for you. But you know what? It was much bigger than that for us. And especially when I talk to younger guests who come on my tour, I always say to them, I was scared to come back, but I was more scared not to come back. Because not to come back would have meant that I gave in to to the people that did this to us. And my husband and I were never going to let that happen. We decided to come back to support the community, which was the community was devastated after 9/11. But we knew we had to come back to support it. And I have to tell you that I'm so proud of what we've developed here. I'm so proud that we did come back and we lived through every single milestone of the rebuild. And I'm grateful every single day for that, because I'm alive and I get to share my story. There are a lot of people who don't. And so one of the major reasons why I volunteer at the Tribute Museum and why I'm so passionate about doing this is because the one thing I can do is I can give a voice to the 2,753 people that on the morning of September 11th went to work and never went home. That is my opportunity. And so that's why I'm here doing what I do.
That was excellent. That was really, really good. I'm crying over here.
Don't cry.
If somebody cries, I'm right there with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I cry, as you can see, I cry too.
Well, it's just, that was really, really good.
Thank you.
Excellent. And, we'll keep these mics on. You probably need to break down a little bit, right?
I didn't show, I didn't show you. There's two photos that I didn't show you. I didn't know if you want to get these.
Yeah,
if you wanted to get these in there.
Probably want to get close-ups of these too.
Yeah, this is a bridge that I walked over on the morning of September 11th. This bridge would take you from the World Financial Center over to the World Trade Center. When I walked over this bridge that morning, it was a beautiful bridge. It was a pedestrian bridge. It was fine. And at 10:28 a.m., when the North Tower collapsed, this bridge was destroyed. And under that bridge had been a command station that was set up by our firefighters. And for those firefighters that were under that bridge that morning, they didn't make it. And I always think about that. Again, that is my opportunity to share their story. The other photo is, people often want to know, well, what did I see? And, we would need hours for me to share with you what I saw. But the photo that I always like to show is I remember going up to my living room window, and understand my apartment looked out with a full view of the South Tower. And so when I walked up to my living room window that day, and it was just a frame, the windows were gone, I looked out, and this is pretty much an example of what I saw. Now this is a close-up, and this photo was taken in the pit at Ground Zero. But there was twisted steel, there was debris, there was ash, there was paper everywhere, all over the neighborhood. And so when I looked out of my living room window, this is an example of what I saw. And people ask me, well, Joan, what did you feel? What did you think when you saw this? And I first thought, how am I ever going to get my life back on track? But then several minutes later, when I had a group of Southern Baptists at my door who simply wanted to help us, they were there just to help, I said to myself, you know what? People like this are going to help. That's the human spirit, and we're going to be okay. It was really the people who came to help after 9/11 who really restored my faith in humanity. And I will never forget any of them.
When you look back at the people who came and how long this took, where did you go for 6 months?
Thank you for that question. So my friend Andy, who was a colleague of mine, we worked together, immediately after the attack Andy said, Joan, you're going to come with me. I have a house in West Orange, New Jersey. You're going to come with me. I got room for you. And we're going to find Frank, my husband, and Frank's going to come, and you guys will stay with me as long as you need to. And we stayed with Andy for a while. And it actually worked for me because I was working on the Jersey side. But for Frank, it was a little bit more difficult because he was working in the city. And so our lives were scattered. Part of us were in New Jersey. Frank stayed at his parents' house. He stayed at his sister's house in New Jersey. We were so lucky to have the support of our families at that time and the support of our friends. And about a month after September 11th, we actually took an apartment just a few blocks away from here on the east side, close to the South Street Seaport. We wanted to be close to our stuff because we still had stuff in the apartment, and it was so difficult to move things out down here. The area was a frozen zone. It was a crime scene. It was very difficult to get in. It was very difficult to get out. And so for the longest time we were coming in just to check on our stuff, and we decided that we wanted to be close. And so we took an apartment, a studio apartment, really a shoebox, but it gave us the opportunity to be close by our apartment, to be close to Frank's job. I could be close to the ferries that took me over to Jersey City. And we lived there for a while. And then towards the end of the year, I had gotten a call from the managing company at Gateway Plaza where I was living. And they said to us, are you guys going to come back? And our answer was absolutely yes. And they said, well, your apartment's going to take time to be repaired. We have another apartment that we can share with you if you want to come back sooner. And we jumped at the opportunity because our lives were everywhere. And we just wanted to get back to some degree of normal. We did look at a couple of apartments, and then we finally decided on one, and we have lived in that apartment ever since. We're still there today.
Yeah.
It's a great community.
And you're happy there?
Happy, absolutely happy. And I wouldn't do anything differently. If I had to do it over again, and God willing, I never have to, but if I had to do it over again, I would do exactly what I did.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're a really good representative of this.
Well, thank you
museum.
for saying that.